had spent 3 years living among humans. 3 years of watching them eat their strange foods and drink their bitter drinks. 3 years of listening to their loud voices and watching their expressive faces. 3 years of writing reports that all said the same thing. Humans were unremarkable. They were average in strength. They were behind in technology. There was a death trap of predators and diseases and natural disasters. The Galactic Syndicate had nothing to fear from them. Was a member of an ancient species known for logic and emotional control. His people had watched civilizations rise and fall for 10,000 years. They observed. They recorded. They never interfered. Had been assigned to human space because no one else wanted the job. Humans were considered boring, a young species still learning to walk among the stars. He lived on an orbital station above New Geneva, a human colony world of 12 million people. The station was called Haven Point, and it served as a trading hub between human space and the wider galaxy. Had a small office where he wrote his reports and a smaller apartment where he slept. He had learned to tolerate human food and human noise and human habits. He had even learned to appreciate some of their art and music, but he never stopped thinking of them as lesser beings. Then the Dominion arrived. Was in the station's observation lounge when the first ships appeared on the long-range sensors. 300 warships arranged in the classic battle formation. The Dominion had conquered 40 species in their 3,000-year history. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They gave their enemies a simple choice: surrender or die. The commander broadcast his demands across all frequencies. Humanity had 72 hours to submit to Dominion rule. All military assets would be surrendered. All colonies would accept governors. All humans would become subjects of the Dominion to be used as the saw fit. Resistance would result in extinction. Had seen this before, not personally but in the historical records. Every species faced with the had made the same calculation. Fighting was hopeless. Surrender meant survival. Even slavery was better than death. They knew this. They counted on it. Their entire strategy was built on the certainty that rational beings would choose life over annihilation. Expected humans to negotiate. He expected emergency meetings and desperate pleas and last-minute compromises. He expected fear and panic and chaos. He began composing his report on the fall of human civilization. But humans did something he did not expect. They did not panic. They did not argue among themselves. They did not send diplomats to beg for mercy. Instead, they began to prepare. Commander Laura Price was the defense coordinator for New Geneva. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes and a voice that could cut through steel. Had met her twice at diplomatic functions. She had seemed pleasant but unremarkable. Now she stood in the command center of Haven Point and gave orders that would send thousands to their deaths. She spoke calmly. She assigned sectors and distributed resources and coordinated with the planetary defense forces below. She did not raise her voice. She did not show fear. She simply worked, as if facing an enemy fleet 300 strong was just another problem to be solved. Admiral Grant commanded the human defense fleet, 47 military vessels against 300 warships. The numbers were impossible. The outcome was certain, but Grant did not withdraw to save his ships. He positioned them in defensive formations around the colony world and began planning attack patterns. Found Sergeant Danny Cole in a loading bay, checking weapons with his squad. Cole was young, perhaps 30 human years, with a shaved head and scars on his hands. He looked up when approached and nodded in greeting. "You should evacuate," Cole said. "They are neutral. They won't target your shuttle." "I am an observer," replied. "I will observe." Cole almost smiled. "Then observe this. We're not surrendering, not now, not ever. Your fleet is outnumbered 6-1. Your ground forces cannot withstand a full Dominion assault. Resistance is mathematically futile." Cole picked up a rifle and checked its power cell. Math never won a war. Did not understand. He watched Cole lead his squad to their assigned position and wondered if all humans had lost their minds. Dr. Helen Shaw was a civilian doctor who had volunteered to coordinate emergency services. She had set up triage stations throughout the colony and organized evacuation routes for those who wanted to leave. But most colonists refused to go. They stayed in their homes and prepared to fight. Walked through the streets of New Geneva's capital city and saw things that confused him. Farmers discussed fields of fire and defensive positions. Teachers memorized the weak points in armor. Children carried messages between command posts. An elderly woman sat on her porch, cleaning an antique rifle that looked older than she was. You should leave, told her, that will show no mercy. The woman looked at him with eyes that had seen a lifetime of hardship. I survived 2 hurricanes, a pandemic, and 40 years of marriage. I'll survive this too. They have destroyed entire civilizations. They haven't met us yet. Did not know what to say. He returned to his office and tried to write a report, but the words would not come. Nothing in his training or experience had prepared him for this. The next morning, he went to the volunteer registration center. The line stretched around the block. Humans of every age and condition waited to sign up for combat roles. He saw teenagers lying about their ages to join the militia. He saw elderly veterans pulling on old uniforms that no longer fit. He saw parents kissing their children goodbye before heading to their assigned posts. A grandmother stood near the front of the line. She was small and fragile with white hair and wrinkled hands. Approached her. Why are you doing this? You cannot possibly survive combat against the... She looked at him with something like pity. I'm not doing this to survive. I'm doing this so my might. Watched her walk into the registration center and emerge with a uniform and a weapon. She moved with purpose, as if she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. He sent a message to the High Council that night. His hands trembled as he typed the words. Previous assessments of humanity were catastrophically wrong. This species is not what we thought. They are preparing to fight a battle they cannot win, and they are doing it with a unity and determination I have never witnessed. I do not know what will happen when they attack, but I know this. We have underestimated humans, and I fear the galaxy will pay the price for that mistake. He did not receive a reply. Commander Laura Price invited to observe the military preparations. She wanted the galaxy to see what was happening. She wanted someone to tell the story, no matter how it ended. Followed her through the corridors of Haven Point and watched humans transform a peaceful station into a fortress. Workers welded armor plates to the hull. Engineers installed weapon systems that had been sitting in storage for decades. Civilians learned to operate gun turrets and damage control stations. Why do you want me here? Asked. Price did not slow her pace. Because someone needs to remember this. If we fall, the galaxy should know how we fell. If we win, the galaxy should know why. You cannot win. The mathematics are clear. Price stopped and turned to face him. Her eyes were hard and bright. Mathematics said we couldn't survive on Earth. Mathematics said we couldn't reach the stars. Mathematics said we couldn't build colonies in systems that tried to kill us every day. We're still here. She walked away before he could respond. The first ships from other human colonies began arriving that afternoon. Watched them on the sensor displays and felt something he had never felt before. Confusion mixed with something that might have been awe. They were not military vessels. They were cargo haulers and passenger liners and mining ships and private yachts. They came from every corner of human space, answering a call that had gone out on every frequency. New Geneva was under attack. Humanity was under attack, and every human who could fly a ship came to help. The vessels had been modified with whatever weapons could be found or built. Saw mining lasers converted to beam weapons. He saw cargo bays filled with improvised missiles. He saw a luxury cruise ship, once designed for wealthy tourists, now bristling with gun turrets operated by volunteer crews. Admiral Grant welcomed each ship as it arrived. He assigned them positions in the defense fleet and integrated them into his battle plans. 200 civilian vessels joined his 47 military ships. It was still not enough. It would never be enough, but he treated each arrival as if it were a gift from the universe. Found Sergeant Cole in a briefing room, explaining tactics to a group of new recruits. They were civilians who had never held weapons before yesterday. Now they listened with focused attention as Cole described how to fight an enemy that outmatched them in every measurable way. They are bigger than us, Cole said, stronger than us, better equipped than us, but they've never fought humans before. They don't know what we can do. A young woman raised her hand. Her name was, and she was a college student who had been studying art history before they arrived. What can we do that they can't? Cole smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We can take a beating that would kill any other species and keep fighting. We can adapt to situations that should destroy us. We can turn anything into a weapon and anywhere into a battlefield. And we never, ever give up. Had heard humans say things like this before. He had dismissed it as empty boasting. Now he was not so sure. Dr. Shaw took him on a tour of the medical facilities. She had converted schools and shopping centers into field hospitals. Volunteer doctors and nurses worked alongside medical machines to prepare for the casualties that would come. The scale of their preparations was staggering. "How many wounded do you expect?" asked. "All of them," Shaw replied. "Everyone who fights will be wounded eventually. Those who survive their wounds will go back to fight again. That's how humans work." "That seems inefficient." Shaw laughed. It was a strange sound in a place preparing for so much death. "Efficiency isn't the point. Survival is, and humans survive by refusing to stop." She showed him the blood supplies and the surgical equipment and the stacks of body bags waiting to be used. She showed him everything without hesitation or shame. This was what war looked like. This was the price humans were willing to pay. Spent that evening in the station's archives, reading human history. What he found disturbed him more than anything he had seen. Humans had been fighting each other since they first learned to hold weapons. Every generation had known war. They had developed thousands of ways to kill and thousands of ways to survive killing. They had destroyed cities and rebuilt them. They had wiped out millions of their own kind and somehow continued to grow. The concept of total war fascinated and horrified him. When humans fought for survival, there were no civilians. Everyone became a soldier. The cook became a fighter. The teacher became a medic. The child became a messenger. Every resource, every person, every idea was turned toward the single goal of victory. Other species had limits. They would surrender when the cost became too high. They would negotiate when defeat seemed certain. They would choose survival over pride. Humans did not think that way. Found George Perry in a weapons training room. Perry was a retired accountant, 63 years old, with bad knees and worse eyesight. He was learning to fire a plasma rifle with the determination of a man half his age. "You could evacuate," said. "There are still ships leaving for safer systems." Perry did not stop practicing. "My granddaughter lives on this colony. You think I'm going to run while she stays? Your death will not save her." Perry finally looked at him. His eyes were tired but steady. "Maybe not, but at least she'll know her grandfather didn't run." The fleet appeared at the edge of the system the next morning. 300 warships, arranged in perfect formation, each one larger and more powerful than anything humans could field against them. They moved with the confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. Admiral Grant addressed his fleet on an open channel. His voice was calm and clear. "They think they know what we are. They think we're weak. They think we'll break. Today we show them how wrong they are. Today we fight for everyone we love and everything we believe. Today we remind the galaxy why humanity will never bow to tyrants." The fleet responded with a roar of voices that could hear through the walls of the station. He watched the human ships move into position. The civilian vessels took the front lines, their volunteer crews knowing they would bear the first wave of the attack. Behind them, the military ships prepared to strike at any opening. It was a desperate formation, designed to buy time with blood. Had seen many battles in the historical records. He had studied tactics and strategies and the mathematics of warfare. He knew how this battle would end. But watching humans prepare to die for each other, he wondered if mathematics was really the only thing that mattered. The commander broadcast his final demand for surrender. His voice was deep and confident, the voice of a conqueror who had never tasted defeat. He gave humanity 1 hour to submit or face total annihilation. He promised that resistance would be punished with extinction. He promised that the name of humanity would be forgotten. Admiral Grant responded with a single word. "No." The commander seemed confused. He repeated his demand as if perhaps the translation had failed. Grant repeated his answer. "No." The channel went silent. Stood in the command center of Haven Point, watching the sensor displays. The human fleet began to move. They did not wait for the enemy to attack. They advanced. The civilian vessels led the charge. Cargo haulers and passenger liners and mining ships, crewed by volunteers who had never trained for combat, flew straight at the formation. They knew they would die. They knew their ships were fragile and their weapons were weak. They flew anyway. The first wave of fire tore through the advancing ships. Watched a cargo hauler explode in a ball of flame and debris. He watched a passenger liner break apart, its hull torn open by beam weapons. He watched humans die by the dozens, then by the hundreds. But the ships kept coming. A mining vessel, its hull already burning, rammed into a destroyer. The explosion took both ships. A yacht, small and fast, wove between the enemy fire and launched its improvised missiles at point-blank range. The pilot died laughing, his last words transmitted across the fleet. "Got you, you ugly sons of nothing." The civilian ships bought time with their lives. Behind them, the military vessels struck at the gaps in the formation. Admiral Grant coordinated the attack with cold precision, sending his ships where they could do the most damage. He knew he was spending lives like currency. He spent them anyway. Had never seen anything like it. Other species would have broken after the first wave of casualties. They would have surrendered or fled or begged for mercy. Humans did none of these things. They fought harder. On the surface of New Geneva, the first landing craft touched down outside the capital city. The invaders expected to find a panicked population, easy to subjugate, ready to submit. They found something else entirely. Sergeant Danny Cole led his squad against the first wave of soldiers. The aliens were massive, standing over 2 meters tall, covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. They carried guns that could punch through walls and blades that could cut through steel. Cole's squad was smaller and weaker and worse equipped. It did not matter. They had spent 3 days preparing the battlefield. They knew every street, every building, every shadow. They had planted traps and created ambush points and memorized escape routes. When they advanced, they walked into a nightmare. The first patrol disappeared, just vanished. Their comms went silent and their trackers stopped moving. The second patrol found pieces of their comrades scattered across a city block. The third patrol never made it past the first intersection. Cole fought like a man possessed. He used his rifle until it overheated, then switched to his sidearm, then to a blade, then to his bare hands. He killed 3 soldiers before a plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder. He kept fighting with one arm until a medic dragged him to cover. "I can still shoot," he said through gritted teeth. "Give me a weapon." The medic was the art history student. She had learned field medicine in 2 days of intensive training. Her hands were steady as she patched the wound. "You're going back to the line in 5 minutes," she said. "Try not to lose any more parts." Cole almost laughed. "Yes, ma'am." Watch the battle through the station's sensor feeds. He saw humans die in ways that should have broken any species. He saw them crushed and burned and torn apart. And he saw the survivors step over the bodies of their friends and keep fighting. A commander demanded to know why the humans would not surrender. His troops were dying faster than expected. His equipment was being destroyed by improvised weapons. His invasion was behind schedule. Commander Price answered him personally. "You came to our home, you threatened our families, you expected us to kneel. We don't kneel, we don't surrender, we don't stop. You can kill every single one of us and the last human standing will still be trying to take one more of you with them." The commander did not understand. His species had conquered 40 others by breaking their will to fight. He had never encountered a species that did not want to survive more than it wanted to resist. Dr. Shaw worked in a field hospital that had once been a school. The wounded came in waves, carried by friends and strangers, and sometimes by their enemies. Prisoners watched in confusion as human doctors treated them alongside their own soldiers. "Why do you heal us?" an officer asked. "We are your enemies." Shaw did not stop working. "You're wounded. That makes you a patient. I don't care who you are or what you've done. I just care about keeping you alive." The officer did not understand. Neither did. The battle raged for 2 days. The pushed forward, paying for every meter with blood. The humans pushed back, paying for every victory with lives. The mathematics still favored the invaders, but mathematics did not account for the thing burning inside every human heart. On the 3rd day, something happened that had not happened in 200 years of conquests. They retreated. Not a tactical withdrawal, not a regrouping, a retreat. The ground forces pulled back to their landing craft. The fleet broke formation and began to withdraw from the system. Admiral Grant did not let them go peacefully. His remaining ships pursued the retreating enemy, hammering them with everything they had left. The civilian vessels, those that still survived, flew alongside the military ships. They had started this fight together. They would finish it together. Watched the fleet flee into the darkness between stars. He watched human ships chase them, burning and broken but still fighting. He watched the impossible become real. He finally understood why the galaxy should fear humanity. They did not fight to win. They fought because fighting was who they were. Victory was hoped for but not required. What mattered was that they never stopped, never surrendered, never accepted any outcome that they had not chosen for themselves. They had conquered 40 species by breaking their spirit. They had found a species whose spirit could not be broken. And they were running. The battle for New Geneva lasted 11 days. 11 days of constant fighting, constant death, constant sacrifice. Stopped counting the casualties after the 5th day. The numbers had become meaningless. What mattered was that humans kept fighting long after any sane species would have surrendered. Commander Laura Price had not slept in 4 days. Saw her in the command center, her eyes hollow, her hands steady on the controls. She had received word on the 3rd day that her husband had died defending a power station. She had received word on the 7th day that her son had died leading a counterattack against an armored column. She did not cry. She did not collapse. She acknowledged the reports and continued giving orders. When a junior officer tried to offer condolences, she cut him off with a single sentence. They did their duty, so will I. Found this inhuman. Then he realized that was exactly the wrong word. This was the most human thing he had ever witnessed. The ability to feel unimaginable pain and still function. The ability to lose everything and keep moving. The ability to place duty above grief, mission above self. Sergeant Danny Cole had lost 6 of his 8 squad members by the 9th day. The replacements were civilians who had been accountants and teachers and students less than 2 weeks ago. George Perry, the retired accountant, turned out to be one of the best soldiers Cole had ever commanded. "How are you doing this?" Cole asked him after Perry single-handedly destroyed a supply convoy. "You never served in the military." Perry shrugged his old shoulders. "I spent 40 years making numbers work for people who didn't want to cooperate. This is easier. The numbers here just want to kill me." Cole laughed for the first time in days. It felt strange on his face. Died on the 10th day. She had been treating wounded soldiers in a forward aid station when an artillery strike hit the building. She threw herself over a patient to shield him from the blast. The patient survived. Did not. Cole found her body in the rubble. She still had her medical kit in her hands. She had been reaching for another bandage when the shell hit. He did not know what to say. He had known her for less than 2 weeks. She had been an art history student who had never seen violence before they arrived. She had learned to save lives in the middle of a war and died doing exactly that. Cole carried her body to the collection point himself. He did not trust anyone else to do it. Admiral Grant sacrificed his flagship on the 8th day. They had brought in reinforcements, and their largest battle cruiser was threatening to break through the human defensive line. Grant positioned his ship directly in the cruiser's path and ordered ramming speed. His crew did not hesitate. They had followed him through 3 days of impossible combat. They would follow him into death. Grant broadcast targeting coordinates to the rest of the fleet until the moment of impact. His last transmission was caught by 100 receivers. "Make it count." The explosion destroyed both ships. The gap it created in the formation allowed human vessels to pour through and hit the enemy fleet from the inside. 12 more ships were destroyed before they could respond. Watched the recordings over and over. He tried to understand why Grant had done it. The admiral could have withdrawn. He could have saved his ship and his crew. He chose to die instead. When asked Commander Price, she gave him a simple answer. "He bought us time. Time for our ships to get into position. Time for our people to keep fighting. His life for thousands of others. That's a trade any of us would make." They did not have a word for this. Searched his entire vocabulary and found nothing that fit. The closest translation was something like voluntary death for collective benefit, but that felt cold and clinical. It did not capture the fire he had seen in human eyes. Dr. Shaw worked until her hands shook and her vision blurred. She saved 300 lives in 11 days. She lost 200 more. Every death hit her like a physical blow, but she did not stop. A young soldier died on her table on the 9th day. He was barely 20 years old and a blade had opened his stomach. Shaw fought for 2 hours to save him. She failed. As he died, the soldier grabbed her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were clear. "Did we win?" he asked. Shaw did not hesitate. "We're winning because of you." He smiled and closed his eyes. Shaw stood frozen for a long moment. Then she washed her hands and moved to the next patient. The commander sent a message to the Dominion Council on the 10th day. He demanded reinforcements. He had lost 1/3 of his fleet and half his ground forces. One colony world was proving harder to conquer than entire star systems. For the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, the Dominion Council refused. The losses were too great. The cost was too high. One planet of 12 million people was not worth the destruction of an invasion fleet. The commander could not believe it. He had never been told to stop. He had never been told that victory was not worth the price. He gave the order to withdraw. The humans did not let them go peacefully. Cole led what remained of his squad in an assault on the rear guard. Perry fought beside him, moving with a speed that is age. They killed 11 more soldiers before the last landing craft lifted off. In space, the human fleet pursued the retreating enemy. They were outnumbered and it did not matter. They chased to the edge of the system and destroyed 30 more ships before the survivors jumped to faster-than-light speed. Commander Price watched the last ship disappear. She finally allowed herself to feel something. Not victory, not relief, just exhaustion and grief and a hollow ache where her family used to be. Stood beside her. He did not know what to say. What words could capture what he had witnessed? Price spoke first. "Now you know what we are." Nodded slowly. "Now I know." She turned to face him. Her eyes were empty, but her voice was steady. "Make sure the galaxy knows, too." The Battle of New Geneva was over. Humanity had won. The cost was beyond anything could have imagined. 60% of the colony's population was dead or wounded. 7 million people had been alive when they arrived. 3 million remained. The defense fleet had been reduced to 12 functional ships out of nearly 250 that had fought. The capital city was ruins. The farmlands were burned. The orbital station was barely holding together. And yet humans called it a victory. Helped with the recovery efforts. He had meant to remain an observer, but observation felt wrong now. He carried bodies from the rubble. He helped distribute food and water to survivors. He held the hands of dying soldiers who had no one else. He did things that would have considered beneath their dignity. He did not care about dignity anymore. Sergeant Danny Cole found him clearing debris from a collapsed building. Cole's arm was in a sling, and new scars marked his face. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 11 days. "You stayed," Cole said. "I did." "Why?" Paused. He had asked himself that question many times. The answer surprised him every time. "Because you showed me something I had never seen. I needed to understand it." Cole nodded slowly. "Do you understand now?" "I think so. I think I finally do." George Perry survived the battle. He attended its memorial service with the rest of Cole's squad. Someone had found a picture of her from before the war, smiling in a sunny classroom surrounded by art books. Perry stared at it for a long time. "She was braver than any of us," he said quietly. "She had never held a weapon in her life. She learned to save lives while the world burned around her, and she gave her life to protect a stranger." The memorial wall grew longer every day. Names etched in stone, thousands of them, each one a person who had chosen to stand and fight, walked along the wall and read the names. He did not know most of them, but he knew what they had done. Dr. Helen Shaw collapsed 3 days after the battle ended. Her body finally gave out after 2 weeks of constant work. She woke up in one of her own hospital beds, surrounded by patients she had saved. "Get me up," she said. "There's still work to do." A nurse pushed her back down. "The work can wait, you need to rest." Shaw wanted to argue, but her body would not cooperate. She slept for 18 hours and dreamed of all the ones she could not save. Commander Laura Price gave a speech to the survivors 1 week after the battle. She stood in the ruins of the Capitol building, surrounded by broken walls and shattered glass. Behind her, a human flag still flew, torn and burned but still standing. She did not celebrate victory. She mourned the dead. She named her husband and her son among them. She named officers and soldiers and civilians who had given everything. She spoke of sacrifice and courage and the price of freedom. Then she announced that human ships would pursue them to their home systems. "Not for revenge," she said, "for security, to ensure this never happened again, to make certain that no enemy would ever think humanity was easy prey." The crowd cheered. It was not a happy sound. It was the sound of people who had seen hell and were ready to walk into it again. Sent his final report to the Galactic Syndicate that night. He spent hours on every sentence, trying to capture what he had witnessed, trying to make his people understand. He wrote about human determination and human sacrifice. He wrote about a species that did not calculate acceptable losses. He wrote about soldiers who fought with wounds that should have killed them. He wrote about civilians who became warriors overnight. He wrote about a fleet that charged impossible odds and somehow won. He wrote the truth. You asked me to assess humanity. You wanted to know if they were a threat. Here is my answer. Humanity is not a threat. Humanity is a force of nature. They are not stronger than us. They are not smarter than us. They are not more advanced than us. But when they fight, they do not stop. They do not surrender. They do not accept defeat. They will lose everything and still find a way to make you pay for taking it. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they have just learned why. The Syndicate High Council requested a personal briefing. Refused. He had more important things to do. He remained among humans for the next 6 months. He helped rebuild New Geneva. He learned to cook human food and tell human jokes and appreciate human music. He attended weddings and funerals and everything in between. He became something the rarely became. A friend. The Dominion sued for peace within 6 months. Their invasion fleet had returned home with tales of horror, tales of a species that could not be broken, tales of soldiers who fought with missing limbs and civilians who died with weapons in their hands, tales of a people who would rather die than submit. The terms of peace were simple: leave humanity alone. Forever, any attack on human space would be met with a response that would make New Geneva look merciful. The Dominion Council agreed without negotiation. 1 year after the battle, stood before a council of alien representatives. 12 species had gathered to hear his testimony. They wanted to understand what had happened. They wanted to know why the mighty had been humbled by a species they had never heard of. Looked at their curious faces and thought about everything he had seen. He thought about Cole leading wounded soldiers into battle. He thought about Perry finding courage he did not know he had. He thought about dying to save a stranger. He thought about Shaw working until her body failed. He thought about Grant ramming his ship into an enemy cruiser. He thought about Price losing her family and still commanding with steady hands. He thought about the grandmother who had refused to evacuate, the children who carried messages through burning streets, the pilots who rammed their dying ships into enemy vessels, the wounded who asked to be carried to positions where they could still fight. He spoke for 3 hours. When he finished, the room was silent. Finally, a delegate raised their voice. You ask why the galaxy should fear humanity, but they are just one species among thousands. Why should we tremble? Smiled. It was a human expression he had learned. Because they do not know how to give up. Because they will sacrifice everything for each other without hesitation. Because they have been fighting since they first learned to stand upright and they have never stopped. Because they walked into certain death with fire in their eyes and somehow walked out again. I watch humans march into war. I watch them bleed and burn and die by the thousands, and they never stopped coming. That is why the galaxy trembles, not because humanity is strong, but because humanity is unstoppable. The council chamber remained silent for a long time. Returned to human space that evening. He had found a home among the stars. He had found a people worth believing in. And he had a story to tell.